hot, hot, hot. Feeling hot, hot, hot.
Welcome back to the second edition of the Fireside Chat during our period of extreme Lent, where we can't be together in person, but we can be together by the fireplace to consider some important issues. This time, three quick points that I'd like to share with you. And the first one is about viruses. And the question that many of us perhaps have been asking, maybe you've heard this, maybe you've done some exploration already. Why would a good God create viruses, bacteria, pathogens that can cause disease? This is really an apologetic question. And when I use the term apologetic, think about that an apology is really making the case for why we should be forgiven. So when we say we're sorry, when we apologize, we're making the case for why we should be forgiven. And so when we ask a question like, why would a good God create viruses, we're asking an apologetic question. We need to make the case for God's existence, for why a good God would create viruses. So I have three short points to try and help you with this question. And of course, you can get far more information on the internet from good sources if you want to dig into this a little bit more. The first answer to the question, why would a good God create viruses, is that viruses are very beneficial. And we know from science that plants in particular have very symbiotic relationships with viruses. Viruses are helpful to these plants. And so as we look at that issue, we see that in many ways viruses serve an important function. And as scientists continue to study, we are learning more and more about the beneficial aspects of viruses to certain organisms. So first we can say that viruses have a positive role to play. The second part of that is that viruses play a very important role in controlling bacteria. So bacteria is everywhere in our world, and bacteria is extremely efficient at mutating, at reproducing, and so viruses help control bacteria. Now, if we didn't have this, our Earth would basically just be bacteria, and there wouldn't be the possibility of life. The important thing to kind of look at are what are known as bacteriophages. These are kinds of viruses, bacteriophages, and from the Greek word phage, which means to devour. And so these viruses are bacteria devours, and it's pretty important that goes on. We need bacteria to be consumed by viruses, otherwise we would be consumed by bacteria. And we know that bacteriophages are one of the most common organisms in all of our biosphere, in all of life. And bacteriophages are important to consume, to devour bacteria. They can infect a bacteria and force that bacteria to release its contents or release its nutrients that provides sustaining life for other creatures, for the entire biosphere. So bacteriophages, very important, and it's a specific kind of virus. It's very common. The third thing to kind of look at is that scientists are now using or looking at and using bacteriophages in an increasing way to treat disease. Bacteriophages that can go in and devour that which is causing disease. So there's all kinds of ways in which we can look at why viruses are important. They form symbiotic relationships with their host. Bacteriophages are so important to consuming bacteria. These are important viruses that are everywhere, critical to our biosphere, and they can even be used, these phages can be used to treat disease. So those are three important points when we think of why would God create viruses. Then we have to deal with the issue of, well, what about pathogens? What about deadly viruses? And when we think about that, we of course have to look to the fact that we are not the way God intended for us to be. Why are we so cruel? Why are we so treacherous? There's aspects of our human nature that we all look at and say, there's something not right with us. And in our Christian worldview, in our biblical worldview, our Christian model, if you want, describes that we are not the way we are intended because through our own decisions we have engaged our sinful nature. God has given us a measure of free will to make decisions, and we've used that in many cases to be pathogenic within our own world. And so because of our sin nature, our fallen nature, our separation from what God intends for us, we shouldn't be surprised that as we perhaps misuse nature, that viruses jump from one species to another and can become pathogenic. Now, as we look to this problem, this dilemma, we assert in our Christian life, in our biblical worldview, that Jesus Christ is the only remedy for this pathogenic state that we find ourselves in, this sinful state. We turn to Jesus Christ as the source, as the remedy that solves all of our challenges. So that's a little bit about viruses. I welcome your comments in the Fireside Chat blog.